In this section, I want to talk about some links about how to get more information about how to get the code and PDF and so on for the book. And I also want to talk about getting started with actually running Haskell programs in practice. The first section gives you a link to the PDF of the book, to a Cabal package, which is the packaging system for Haskell. This allows you to download all the code for the book that accompanies the book, and it puts it in a directory, and what we'll do is use that directory or folder as the base for any work that we're doing. There's the old website as well. There's a link to that. That has some additional information that hasn't been transferred yet. So that's another resource. The next block gives you general information about how to get Haskell running on your machine. It may be that your university or institution runs it for you, in which case you don't need to worry about this. But if you want it for a personal machine, or you don't have an institutional setup, then the place to go is the link here, Getting Started. It's on the haskell.org Getting Started page, and that tells you how to install the standard, or install and update the standard Haskell systems, including build system and support for the Haskell language server, which provides support inside IDEs and editors like Visual Studio Code. There is a system which you can use that means you don't have to install anything on your machine. It allows you to compile Haskell programs. So it doesn't give you an interactive view, but it does give you an opportunity to try out Haskell programs which run with a main program and a main expression. And that's called the Haskell Playground, and I've included a link for that. And there's also a really useful facility where you can find your way around standard libraries for Haskell by looking up functions according to their type, rather than having to remember their name. And that's a valuable tool which we'll try out and use as we go through the course. I've next put some links to general Haskell sites, haskell.org, which is the main site for all things Haskell, and also links to Haskell on Reddit and Stack Overflow. And then finally, more learning resources. There's a great free book, Learn Your Haskell for Great Good. I put a link to that. An overview of all the books about Haskell that are available, and a particular link to the wiki book, which provides both a beginner's introduction and a more advanced introduction to Haskell. And then finally, a tutorial about some of the things which has been called the awkward squad, the things like IO, state, exceptions and so on, that are not so easy or not so straightforward to handle in a pure functional language like Haskell. But that tutorial gives you a unified overview of those things. And that's a resource that we'll come back to later in ghci, that's GHC, Glasgow Haskell Compiler Interactive, and its integration into Visual Studio Code. Let me just give you a brief introduction to what we can do with ghci, and then we'll see it in practice. The commands for ghci tend to start with a colon, so :h lists all the commands, and if you type that, you'll see that it's got a whole lot of functionality built in. What I've done here is separate out the things that I think are most important for getting started. So you can just type an expression, and what that will do is result in the expression being evaluated. You can type :t or :type and then an expression, and that will give you back the type of the expression. And you can type definitions to the prompt beginning with let. Now, the downside of that is once you leave ghci, those definitions are lost. So typically what we do is we include definitions in modules in a file like this, test.hs. Begins with the module declaration, module test, where, and then it consists of a sequence of definitions. We've defined a number, ex, to be 3 plus 4, and we said before the definition that it's an integer, and we've defined a function double that, if you remember the notation with the arrow, it takes an integer and returns an integer, so that double, when applied to x, a variable, an unknown, returns 2 times that variable. Now, once we have a module-like test in the file test.hs, we can load that module into ghci. We can then evaluate expressions using definitions in the module. We can then modify the module and reload it. And instead of having to type the last thing you evaluated, you can just type :it for do the last expression again. Okay, here's the list of all the commands, but let's get started now and look at ghci in practice. Okay, so what we see here on the left is an editor window with the test.hs file inside it, and on the right we have a standard terminal. And inside the terminal we can type ghci. And here we see ghci, and we can type an expression to the prompt, and we get the result. And let's load the file test.hs. Okay, it's telling us now one module is loaded. So now we can evaluate expressions that involve the things that are defined in the we can do double of 23 plus 2, which works out at 48. If we wanted double of 23 plus 2, all doubled, which gives us 50, we need to put the 23 plus 2 in brackets. So when we write something like double of 23 plus 2, it's like we're writing it with brackets around the double 23. The function application binds more tightly. It's stickier than anything else like an addition operation. What we can do now is we can make some changes in here. We can add another definition in here. Let's have a trip that takes an integer to an integer. And let's say trip of y is 3 times y. Okay, so we've got that. Now we can reload the file, but we'll see it's saying that nothing has changed. of the commands in ghci, and there we are. Now, I've shown you this in Visual Studio Code. It's quite possible to run ghci in any terminal integrated into an IDE or separate from an old-fashioned editor, but you have this same cycle of putting definitions into a file, into a module, and then saving that, reloading into ghci, and that will check the correctness of the definitions when you load into ghci, and then you can evaluate expressions and so on using all the definitions in the file. Now, in fact, when we use ghci, is to load a folder. So what I've done is I've opened the folder that has all the files for the book, and it's called Craft 3E, and that's the folder that you will get if you download the package from Cabal, the link I gave you on the web page. So open a folder, and that will ensure that you that the code is seen to be Haskell, and the links between the various modules will be seen because they sit in a single folder. Okay, so I think that's really where I wanted to end this, so let's stop here.